Public Library, and today I'm going to show you how to make butterscotch pudding from scratch with items that you probably always have or almost always have in your kitchen. A lot of times people will buy the box of pudding mix and just mix some milk with it and whip it up in 2 minutes. And that's fine, but if you don't have a box of pudding and you have all these ingredients, I'm going to show you how easy it is really to make it once you learn what you're doing. The other thing you might get a lot of is the little pudding cups that you get in the grocery store to put in your lunches. And this is a way to be more environmentally conscious by not putting more plastic in the environment, more throwaway stuff. You can make your own pudding, and if you have little cups, little plastic cups with lids that you can reuse, you can make your own pudding to take in your lunches. So a few things that I want to tell you about before we start, some housekeeping things. First of all, you want to make sure any hair that hangs in your face is pulled back away from your face if you wear a hat or a bandana or a head wrap or anything to keep you from having to fiddle with your hair as you're cooking. You want to make sure your sleeves are rolled up or out of the way, or better yet, wear short sleeves and then you don't have to worry about it. Any kind of floppy clothing that could get caught in the food or in the stove, you want to avoid wearing that kind of stuff in the kitchen. You want to not have any kind of dangly jewelry that could fall into your food, or, you know, when you lean over it swings in the way. You don't want to have any of that. And you want to wash your hands before you cook, always. And you itch your nose or push up your glasses with the back of your hand, sneeze or cough into your elbow. And just basically anytime you touch something that's not food, you should wash your hands. So, and we're going to be breaking some eggs today. So if you get egg goo on your hands, you want to wash that off as well. And the other thing I wanted to tell you is to make sure your work surfaces are clean. You can just use ordinary dish soap and a dishcloth and some hot water to clean your surfaces, but make sure all of your cooking surfaces are clean and tidy. Okay, the ingredients you're going to need are some cornstarch, and usually this comes in a box, a cardboard box, but I just happen to have a can here. You need some salt, just a tiny bit of salt. You need some brown sugar, and the recipe calls for dark brown sugar, but I've used this for light sugar, light brown sugar, and it comes out just fine. So whatever you have in your pantry, in your closet, in your cupboard, will work, any kind of brown sugar. You want some milk and some vanilla. And I like to use pure vanilla extract, whatever vanilla flavoring you have, feel free to use it. You'll need 2 eggs. And you'll need some butter. I just have a piece of butter left over from something else. So that's what you're going to need for ingredients. What you need for supplies, you will need equipment. You will need a saucepan that's big enough to hold the 2 cups of milk, plus everything else that goes in there. You will need a bowl to hold the milk and the egg, because you're going to beat that together. You need a container to put, because we're going to be separating eggs or separating the yolks from the whites. So you need some kind of little container to hold the whites as you're separating them, and I'll show you how to do that. You will need a liquid measure. This kind of measure is only used for liquids because the volume of liquids is a little bit different than the volume of solid ingredients. So you want to make sure you're measuring correctly. So this is for the milk. Then you need 1/2 cup of this kind of cup to measure the brown sugar. You're going to need a tablespoon, a teaspoon, a half teaspoon, and an eighth of a teaspoon. Now, a lot of measuring spoon sets don't have eighth teaspoons, so if you don't have one of those, you can take a quarter teaspoon and kind of eyeball 1/2 of the quarter, which is 1/8. 1/2 of 1/4 is 1/8. Math. Whoop. Sorry. Okay, and you will need a spoon to stir your pudding as you're cooking it. You'll need a whisk to whisk the milk and the egg together. And you will either need a bowl to put your pudding in, or if you have some kind of little dessert cups, I only have one of these, otherwise I'd use them. You need about 4 of these, or if you have little plastic containers with lids that you can use for single servings for a lunch serving, you can go ahead and use that. So now let's get started. So we're going to start with the dry ingredients first, and they're going to go right into your saucepan. So we're going to start with 1/2 cup of dark brown sugar, or whatever brown sugar you have. So you're going to take your 1/2 cup measure, and I just kind of dig in there. You want to pack it down. So instead of putting my hand there and getting it all sandy, I use the side of the bag if you have a bag, and just sort of push at it through the bag. And you want it pretty even. I could put a little bit more in there. You want it even across the top, all the way to the top. A little bit more. And you can just sort of smush it and blow it out through the bag. Okay, so that's pretty. We're going to put that in there. It's not technically completely dry, but it's drier than the milk. So now we need 2 tablespoons plus 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. So kind of fluff that up a little bit. And I'm just going to take a knife and flatten that out. 1, 2, there's your 2 tablespoons. Now we need 2 teaspoons. 1, oop, 2. And then we need 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt. And as I said, if you don't have an 1/8 teaspoon measure, just kind of take a 1/4 teaspoon and figure out when you have half. Okay, so there's my 1/8 teaspoon. Okay, so now I'm just gonna sort of mix this up a little bit. I have a non-stick pan, and I have a silicone coated whisk so that I don't scratch it. You could use a spoon, a wooden spoon, or like the silicone coated spoon that I have to stir it with. Okay, and just kind of get that all mixed up. Get those lumps of brown sugar as unlumpy as you can get. Okay, so there we are. We're going to put this aside for now. We're going to take our bowl, and then we are going to add the milk. We need 2 cups of milk. Any kind of milk will do. You could probably even use a plant-based milk if you're lactose intolerant. We're going to pour that into our mixing bowl here. Now, fun, we're going to separate some eggs. So what you're going to do first of all, you're going to take your egg, you're going to tap it enough to put a dent in it, and then you're going to pull your 2 halves apart. And you're going to hold it so that the egg yolk stays inside the shell. And you see how the white sort of dropped off. And we're just going to kind of gently pour it back and forth between the shells until we get all the white out of there. Okay, so there's your yolk. And I'm just going to dump that in, in the bowl. There's my egg white. And see, there's no yolk in there. You have to do it gently. Okay. Tap enough to make a dent. You're going to hold it up so that the yolk stays in the bottom shell. It's going to get on your fingers, and you just have to get over it. And then you're just going to gently pour it into the other shell, back and forth, until we get all of the white out of there. Okay, that looks pretty good. Bloop. Okay, now you can keep this, and that's probably close to the equivalent of 1 egg. So if you want to bake it in a recipe, you can do that. You can put it in some scrambled eggs. You can find other recipes that use just egg whites. But don't throw them away, because you could use it. Now I'm going to wash my hands because I got egg goop all over, if I can figure out how to pause my camera without getting egg all over it. Okay, so now we are going to beat up our eggs. And we want to mix them so that they're fully incorporated, fully mixed into the milk. If you don't have a whisk, you can use a mixer. You can use a fork and just sort of froth it up there. And you want to make sure it's good and mixed in there. You don't want clumps of egg, because that would not make good pudding. Okay, so before we start cooking, I'm going to measure my butter, because that goes in as soon as you finish cooking everything. So I need just 1 tablespoon. So if you notice on the butter, it already has it measured for you. You can just cut it off. You don't have to get your spoon and measure it. So I'm just going to cut off 1 tablespoon with a knife that's not very sharp. Okay. I'm just going to put this aside here. Later. Now, we are going to put our milk mixture into the brown sugar mixture. So here we go. We're going to pour the milk into, now we don't have the heat on yet. We're just going to make sure everything's good and mixed together. So I'm just gonna, I like to use the whisk. So it just seems to mix everything quicker, but if you don't have a whisk, just use your spoon and just make sure everything is well combined, beaten in there. That looks pretty good. Okay, I'm going to get my spoon. I'm going to put the heat on to medium heat. So I'm going to do, like, I have an electric stove, so I'm going to do about a 6. Now it's going to take a little while for this to warm up. If you have an electric stove, you're going to have coils like this, and it takes a while for the electricity to flow through the coils and start to make it warm. If you have a gas stove, you have little flames that come up, and that's instant heat, so you want to start stirring right away. You should stir anyway. Now this, you have to stir constantly until it boils, because if you don't, your egg is going to coagulate, which means it's going to make it lumpy. You're going to have egg lumps in your pudding, and I don't think that would be very fun. So we're going to warm this up. Keep on stirring. And this might take 5 minutes or more to get to the point. So you might want to put on some music to just, you know, distract you, or an audiobook, or sometimes I just read a book while I'm doing this. If you can read and stir at the same time. But this is going to take a little while. So I'm going to come back when something starts to happen. Okay, there's a little bit of steam starting to come off of this. And we're looking for it to start boiling and thickening up a little bit. Now you have two different thickeners in this pudding. The one is the cornstarch, and cornstarch mixed with a liquid will cook into a thicken, will thicken your whatever you're making. A lot of times people use it for gravy or sauces to make it thicker. And then you have the egg yolks, and the egg yolks give it some body and add some fat and some richness to your finished product. So it is starting to get a little thick, but you want to keep stirring it, and you also want to keep it at a lower temperature, because if you cook it too fast, as I said before, the eggs will coagulate and will ruin your pudding. Okay, looks like we're starting to get some bubbles here, so I'm going to set my timer for 2 minutes. Ooh, look, see, it's thickening up. Now we got to keep stirring it so it doesn't get lumpy. You want to speed up your stirring. You might want to turn your heat down a little bit. But see, now it's more pudding-like. See, that happened almost instantly. And be careful, because it's it's blopping and could burn you. So you might want to lift it off the heat a little bit till it stops doing that. If you have an electric stove, if you have a gas stove, you should see a temperature change immediately when you turn your heat down. And so we're going to keep stirring. Make sure that we don't get any egg lumps in there. And soon we will have pudding. That's my 1 minute warning. My stove is kind enough to give me a 1 minute warning on the timer, so I'm actually going to turn the heat off, because on an electric stove the heat continues to be warm on the coil for a while after you cook something. So you get a sense of, when you have an electric stove, you get a sense of when to turn the heat off, so that that residual heat in the coils will continue to cook your food. It's a little bit of practice. And as I said, if you have a gas stove, you want to keep the heat on, because that is instantaneous heat right under your pan. And when you turn it off, there's no more heat. Okay, so now we want to get our butter. We'll throw that in right away so that it melts in there while it's hot. And we want to get our vanilla. And we need 1.5 teaspoons of vanilla. So there's one. And there's a half. Stir that in. Pure vanilla actually has alcohol, so you want to put it in when it's hot so that the alcohol evaporates out and just leaves the vanilla flavor. So that butter is almost melted. Now what we're going to do, I'm going to take this off the heat and move it over here. And we're going to keep stirring it until That butter is all melted. And then you're going to pour it into your containers, whatever. Well, actually, no, you're going to pour it into a bowl, first of all. So we're going to pour it into our bowl, and then we're going to let it cool. If you get it out of the hot pan, it'll cool faster. And if you really want to hurry up the cooling process, you can take like a cake pan, like a 13 by 9 cake pan, and fill it with ice cubes and nestle the bowl down in amongst the ice. And you wouldn't want to use a ceramic or a glass bowl for that. You'd need plastic or a metal bowl, stainless steel bowl. Okay, so you're going to let that sit at room temperature until it cools down. You want to come back and stir it maybe every 5 minutes, because if you don't stir it, it will get like a skin on the top, and it's all right to eat. It doesn't hurt anything, but it's just not very appetizing. So we're going to just let this sit here and get cool enough to put in the refrigerator. Okay, so it's been about 10 minutes, and it's still a bit warm, but it's just about room temperature. You didn't see me do that. So if you're going to pour it into individual servings, now is the time. It did get some tiny little lumps in it. If that really bothers you, or yours is even more lumpy than this, you can take a mesh strainer, a sieve, and you can put your pudding in there and force it through with a rubber spatula, and it'll come out nice and lump free on the other side. Make sure you put this over another bowl when you do that, because otherwise you'd be all over the counter with this. All right, so I think this is cool enough to go in the refrigerator. Now you could eat it warm if you wanted to, but I guarantee you it'll taste better when it's cool. So it's going to take maybe an hour to completely cool. Maybe a little bit more if you have the bowl. So I'm going to put some plastic wrap over the top to avoid getting this dreaded skin on the top of your pudding. Some people put the plastic right on the surface of the pudding, and that ensures that no skin forms. But I'm going to put this in. Well, you can still see it's still a little steamy. But it should be okay. If you can touch it, it should be okay to be put in your refrigerator. Okay, so this has been cooling for about an hour and a half, and you can see it's pretty firm. And now we're going to taste it. Pay no attention to the hole that's already in there. And that is very tasty. So what you could do with this, if you wanted to make a fancier dessert, you could get a graham cracker pie crust. And while it's still warm, before you put it in the refrigerator, you can pour the pudding into the pie shell and chill it. And then you could put some whipped cream on top, or you could drizzle with a little chocolate syrup or a little caramel syrup, and have a nice fancier dessert. But this is very tasty just the way it is. It takes a little more work than your average instant pudding, but the taste is just so much better. And it's all ingredients that you probably have in your house, so you don't have to go out and buy anything special. So I hope you enjoy it, and bon appetit.